There was not much of a problem here when the old extension center became a community college.
That's right.
Yeah, it's when it became a four-year university.
And that's, yes, but the fact that that community college was here, and the Republicans did help in that, in establishing that, because there was a lot of stuff that had to be worked out in supporting it, for example.
Yeah. Well, the university has had an enormous impact on the economic development and quality of life and opportunity in this northern Kentucky region. In a sense, I think we're seeing the natural progression of the development of post-secondary education up here today with the creation or expansion of a community college.
Yeah.
It will have some challenges for NKU, but I think it makes sense for a maturing community to have this kind of development over the next few years.
I think it's legitimate to claim that we are one reason that there will never be the Newport that existed at one time, a kind of gambling center. And Newport is terribly respectable these days, and they're growing more. And it's going to be a rather pretty little town when they get through with all.
Did you just see where they brought in GE Capital for the world?
Isn't that something?
Did it pass? I hadn't heard today.
Well, they had to work out the negotiations on the lease of the building.
Good.
Let me go to a broader question with all of you. You're all students of higher education. You all continue to monitor the progress that not only Kentucky higher education is making, but also nationally, internationally. Talk a bit about the condition of higher education these days. How does it look? AD, you've been thinking about this. You've been thinking about the major challenges that confront post-secondary education in Kentucky and beyond. What comes to mind immediately for you?
The fact that higher education has to change is probably the biggest challenge. And it's not solely just to get administrators to take the leadership to do it. It's a matter of those who provide the program.
The faculty.
Yeah. I think that Kentucky, for example, has the best opportunity for advancement, that meaning change, now, and we have had for the last 4 years, that we're going to have in the next 15 years.
There are points in the history of these industries that are marked by enormous progress, aren't they? I mean, it's true of any industry, higher education being one of them. When you talk about the need for change, what types of change do you think about?
For one thing, I think we're going to see program changes that we have not seen before, but are becoming much more evident now. I'll just give an illustration. I've talked with some students, not northern students, frequently, recently. I said, what are you taking? What are you immersed in? And I'll pull out from one of those conversations something that should have been obvious to a lot of people for quite a while. That is, this one student said, I'm taking a course in psychology and biology. Now, up to this time, we've been treating psychology as though it were just something that is associated with the brain. That's not true. It is, of course, associated with brain, but the tie with the physical aspects of an individual and the condition of that physical condition makes it necessary, if you're going to be a counseling psychologist, to begin thinking in some broader terms and the devising of programs along that way. Now, I think you're on to something very similar to that, and that is what you're incorporating, or the way you're doing it in your science program.
Integrative science.
Yes.
Studying at the intersection of the
Right.
disciplines.
I think that's outstanding.
We just had a endowed professorship created in biocomputing.
Yeah.
Who would have thought of biocomputing as I hadn't thought about it until somebody suggested it.
Mm-hmm.
But the need, but that suggests when you talk about the need for change, it seems to me that the need to rethink how we organize knowledge. I mean, universities have organized knowledge in essentially the same way for
Well,
hundreds of years.
By subject matter rather than an integrative approach like we've been talking about.
But, President, I think if you take the organizational approach first, that is pretty much what Kentucky has been doing for years. They'll first see whether the organization that we have for this, that, or whatever will accommodate this idea. It ought to be the other way around.
Yep. What is it? Form should follow function.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do. It's difficult to do with a legislator.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's certainly an element. There's some hope, I think, in Kentucky for two reasons. You can look at the reorganization of public education in the state, that is elementary and secondary. That was a tremendous course induced by a court order, but
So was a lot of social progress.
and then I think this last action of the governor and the legislature program is the improvement program in higher education holds a lot of promise, depending upon what we project.
I agree with you. Yeah. I think you're right. Leanne, how about you?
I think we're really becoming much more consumer-oriented. We've got to be, because I think there's so much competition out there, and some of it I don't like in a sense, but it's a reality. You look at the University of Phoenix and what they've done in terms of their technology and computers and other things along that line. There was an article in the paper the other day about colleges and universities accommodating the student in terms of hours. I think it's going to be more weekend courses, something I think you'll find some resistance, as you alluded to a while ago, in terms of the people who produce the programs. But I think a school is not going to be attuned to what the consumer needs in terms of time, delivery, other things along that line. It's going to be an institution that's going to have some problems. I like AD in the sense that if you look back at some of my speeches, I talk a lot about integrative approaches. There are a lot of very good private schools, for example, that the first 2 years, instead of taking the courses, English, math, and stuff like that, they'll take a topic and they'll teach it in an interdisciplinary way. But every time we investigated that, always got into money problems and didactic hour problems, and we've all been through it. But it's going to happen. You know, I always said that I was a very good student in English, but I never understood English until I took a foreign language. And I've always said we ought to teach English. You had 12 years of English in either your public school or your K through 12. What's the first thing you do? You take basic English again. I think we ought to look at some innovative ways, like using foreign language to help teach English. I remember we had one faculty member who was quite good. Unfortunately, she's dead now, but she wanted to teach biology, and she had some background in it through her German classes. I thought it was a great idea, but we were never able to carry it off. But I think consumerism now is going to change a lot of things. I think the demands of the people out there are going to really change dramatically in our education through technology as well as demand for hours.
You know, in many respects, American higher education has always been consumer-driven to a certain extent. I mean, it's always been seen, it seems to me, as a vehicle to achieve some larger social purposes. I mean, it brought science to agriculture. It provided a workforce for industrial expansion. It provided research and development for national defense. It provided intergenerational mobility. I mean, all those things were seen as, I think these universities have been seen as instruments for social progress in our country.
I remember dramatically is with Sputnik. I thought that was one of the most dramatic changes in a society I've ever seen in my life in terms of the money that was infused in education, getting people excited about education.
And DEA.
And then we got on the moon, and we just didn't have any strategic plan, in a sense, after that. But, you know, I think about it when I was a student back in the 50s. You know, they used to tell us in orientation, well, look at the student to the right of you, look at the student to the left of you. You know, two of you aren't going to be here, or something like that.
What a horrible way to start.
And it was a horrible thing, but it wasn't consumer-oriented, that's what I was trying to say. Those
Sure
days. I could have
wasn't.
cared less. But,
I remember that. We probably all remember something like that. Frank, how about you?
By contrast, when I go into a classroom with freshmen in a survey section, I always say, every one of you is going to make an A in this course, if you do just exactly what I tell you to. But I was thinking, well, university comes from the idea of universal, and we have had great developments through the years. There was a time in the early 19th century, if you went to college, you studied Latin and Greek, and certainly in the colonial period. And gradually other things came on, and we can change. Now, I do have a concern about the fact that education at all levels simply does not work together, it seems to me. We have, and I'm very sorry, but we do have, in I think all of our state institutions, students who have not taken, say, a course in math in high school, where they would have had it for free, and come to college, and we can't give them credit for it, but we give the course. And I do think that some way there is the need in America, well, I think there's the need in America for parents to play the role they ought to play with their children. This gets, I can't, I think if the only thing I think wrong with elementary and secondary education is parents, because they simply are not acting as parents used to act. And they're not encouraging kids as they should be encouraged, and they're not looking over them. My mother taught in a one-room school. That was long before my time, you understand. But every time I had an assignment in grade school, she would go over it, and I got very embarrassed. I turned in perfect math papers every day, and some of the other students hated me. I don't blame them for hating me, but I do think that something of that is very, very important, and I think we've gotten together. We've had these gatherings of groups, and with representing high schools and representing college faculties. But I don't think we've gone far enough. I think Jefferson's dream for a University of Virginia was not a bunch of buildings at Charlottesville. It was for the whole system. And I think that's something
Sure.
that he had a dream.
And that was expressed in the Wisconsin idea?
To an extent.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. It has to be. I also worry a lot about what the public schools are doing insofar as supporting their people. There is a great tendency, I think, for them not to do that, and I don't know. But I have no easy solution for what I think are the delinquencies of education at all.
You know, it's interesting. 10 years ago, I suppose, I had breakfast with a fellow by the name of D. Hock. D. Hock was a banker in the United States who was the founder of Visa. And DeHock talked about banking 30 years ago compared to banking today. He said 30 years ago, if you were involved, if you were to do business with a bank, you did business on the banker's hours, in the banker's location, on the banker's terms, and you did it as a supplicant. 30 years ago, 10 years ago, if you were to engage higher education, you did it in higher education's location, on hours that were convenient to faculty, and you did it on higher education's terms. He then talked about banking over that 30-year period. And the point he made, a couple of interesting points. He said, today, you can bank almost anywhere, anytime. Very rarely do you go to the bank. Banks are now distributed. Banks have become demonopolized in a way that everyone is involved in the banking business, and that federal legislation just in the last 2 weeks has even increased that more. And I couldn't help but think he was describing higher education as well. Today, you can higher education is becoming distributed. The point that you were making, Leon, and UAD, that we will be we're taking the campus to the students. The students have other options. We've become demonopolized. When you think about the number of providers who are now in the post-secondary business, it didn't exist a year ago, 5 years ago. And it forces us, I think, to think about what it means to be a university.
Yeah.
And,
I think one of the challenges we're going to face as technology becomes more paramount in the lives of learners is how do you handle the socialization process that one has always felt and had incorporated with them when they're on the campus and in the classroom.
I agree.
And things like that. And I do worry about that a lot.
I agree. And I worry about how we prepare the next generation of faculty to behave in very different ways. I mean, one of the other points that DeHock made was that back 30 years ago, there were about 5 or 10% of the bank presidents that understood what was going on. And the rest didn't have a clue. Most of them threw up their hands and said, nobody's going to bank on a machine on a street corner at 3 a.m. That nobody will do that. This is faddish, and it will quick. And now, and I find myself at times describing a world to our faculty and to our staff that one has to make a bit of a leap to get there, but not such a big leap. But and we're going to be hiring the next generation of faculty who are going to be expected to behave in very different ways than this generation, and it creates some challenge for us, I think. A.D., please.
Well, I think on a couple of points. One is we really can't look at higher education in isolation to the society and the culture in which it exists.
I agree. Yeah.
Look at what's happened to the family, really the dissolution of it, because of the necessity to get a living standard that requires both parents to work.
No,
Now, that's just one. Another is, not long ago, the American Academy of Science came out with a statement that each year 40% more is added to our cultural inventory. Now, we need to think about that for the simple reason that it's no longer possible simply to transmit information. And there is a function that has to be performed by a university because it's about the only remaining source of reliability for making it into knowledge.
and that function is to turn information into knowledge.
That's right.
Knowledge into wisdom.
Well, on
Hopefully.
the matter of wisdom, there, it's this kind of, I think, procedure. One is to analyze whatever it is you're concerned about. And the second then comes the matter of synthesizing, because no single fact anymore remains by itself in isolation. It's related to something. And that assimilation is what connects that's where we're beginning to find out about babies' connections with the environment, the surrounding.
Yep.
And then comes the matter of understanding what that assimilation means. And that's the way you get wisdom.
You know, I've been talking to our professional studies college and its faculty about linking the in-school and out-of-school development of children. I mean, we treat education, elementary and secondary education, at times we prepare teachers as if those schools exist in hermetically sealed environments. I mean, kids come to school either prepared to learn or not prepared to learn. And if they're not well fed and if they're concerned about their own safety, or they go home to circumstances that don't reward learning, I think it's very difficult to have good schools.
Yeah.
Sure.
But the family has so, both of you have made this point, the family has so much to do with that, and the environment in which post-secondary education has to do its work today is very different than it was when each of you was president. I mean, the culture in which, I mean, it's a very different, one of the biggest challenges we confront today, I believe, is to prepare students who come from a very homogeneous community to live in a world that's anything but homogeneous. To live in a world that's multicultural. I teach a University 101 student, a class, and most of those students have never been outside of Northern Kentucky. But most of them will go to work in companies that may not ask them to work abroad, but the companies themselves have interaction with other cultures. And
That's been the big change in Northern Kentucky since I've been here. It was terribly homogeneous. You were born here, you were educated here, and to a large extent, or not very far away, and you died here. And I think the university really brought in the first large group of non-Northern Kentuckians in the area, and I know culturally it has just had a dramatic impact on the region here. And then with international students coming in, that's had an impact. And you're right, it's a very atypical situation of what the world's like, and the challenges to try to meet that. And I think there's been a lot of encouragement in that regard in terms of what's happened. Now you go to Boone County, there's more non-Northern Kentucky natives out there than there are natives, and I would say that's probably true in every county here now, with all the new industries and everything else that has come in. We've gone from a bedroom community to being an economic vital area on our own right.
I had a CEO put this in very practical terms with me a year or so ago. He said, I want employees who can write memos that can travel across 5 different countries where we do business and not be offensive to anyone. I thought that was an interesting kind of pragmatic approach to this.
Very nice.
And
but you know, I think when we were talking about the challenges of higher education, one of the things that I think we failed miserably is I think the associations and administrators kind of combined have got to come to some way of providing stimuli to the faculty about what life is all about and the changes that are occurring and things like that, because faculty come out and we're all guilty of this in a certain extent, and they want to emulate their own experiences.
yes.
A lot of them went away to college. Well, today most students don't go away to college. A lot of them were in major research institutions with their PhD. That's not what a lot of institutions are about. And I think there's just a lot of change. Now, I used to think in the 60s, in the golden days of the 60s, when there was a lot of movement in higher education. I remember my first year when I was teaching, I got about 3 or 4 offers, unsolicited offers, to come and teach at other institutions. Well, that came to a crashing halt about the 1970, 69, 70. And there's no mobility to speak of for most people at the faculty level. So you don't have that new blood or turnover or anything, which I think creates challenges and new synthesis. And somehow I think we have not done a good job, and yet I think the future requires that we've got to have that type of opportunity for faculty exposure.
I agree. faculty development, I would guess, was an important
Uh,
priority for all of you.
Do these folks know how many foreign students we have on campus now?
Nearly 400.
Yeah.
That's
And
wonderful.
we will do what, at least in my short tenure, is the first international recruiting visits in the next 6 months. Greg Stewart, who is back as associate vice president, will be doing, because I think we've got to internationalize the campus much more so than it is at this point.
I'm delighted to hear that. You know, I have a very good friend at Edinburgh on the faculty. It was Alan Day is who it was. And Alan visits in behalf of Edinburgh University, visits colleges around. I think he comes to Walnut Hills in the greater Cincinnati area. But there's no very good reason why we can't do this sort of thing. And I'm always delighted to get a student from a foreign country in class, especially in diplomatic history and so on. And it means, I think, means a lot. And it means a lot, I think, when we can send students abroad for research and things too and everything.
I'd like to make it possible for every one of our students to study abroad for some length of time and help subsidize those costs with endowment. It's
I have a student in diplomatic history now who spent a year in Germany, and she's the best student in the class. She's seen other cultures.
Is higher education better today than it was 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago?
Oh, gee.
AD, what do you think?
In some respects, yes.
How is it better and how is it...
Well, for one thing, when you look at it from a standpoint of a public good, it's reaching a lot more people now than it did 15 or 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to have to reach more. Talking now in Kentucky about 60,000 more enrolled
Yes.
in higher education than we presently have. Then the question comes, how can that be done? And there are some answers to it, I think. That's one way it's certainly better. I think also that there are faculty who perhaps steep more deeply in a discipline are better than they were 20 or 30 years ago.
Are you concerned about the erosion of standards? There's been some writing in the New York Times recently about concern about this tendency towards consumerism resulting in a erosion of academic standards.
Well, I've been concerned a bit for some time about one example of that is this remedial education that we've been into. When the high schools, for instance, do not turn out somebody who is able enough to get college work done, we take them in. And in effect, now that's one of the deficits on the funding by enrollment. That was merely a way to do two things: to become more Christianized in our compassion for people to be served, but at the same time, it also increased our income.
Sure did.
So that's an example, however, where I think we cannot continue that very much longer.
It makes it very difficult in the classroom to try to accommodate the very well-prepared student and the student who is so deficient.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
A lot of this is due to the Vietnam War,
That's right.
when it became a habit with so many people on college faculties not to fail anybody because that meant he'd be sent to Vietnam. and we have not recovered from that. But I am appalled when a student asks me what well-to-do means. And
Is it going to be on the test?
It's, I don't know. I hate to do this. Am I out of line to say it's 20 after 5?
Oh, it is. And Ron, we're doing okay. We've got till about 5:30 or so.
You know, I thought maybe we'd seen plenty of erosion because, as we all know, the average grade for most people now in a lot of places are Bs, whereas Cs used to be, at least when I was in school, more the commonality. But I heard something today, it was appalling, and I have no reason to not think it's true. A woman that works with me has a daughter now at the University of South Carolina at Columbia, and she said her daughter said she gets 5 points if she turns in her homework, just for turning in the homework.
There was a piece in the New York Times 6 or 8 months ago that was talking about how important student evaluations are today in promotion and tenure decisions, and the pressure to dumb down courses in order to make sure that those evaluations remain high, and that's a concern. I mean, rigor, it seems to me, needs to be an important part of what a university education is about.
I wish I hadn't started student evaluations at Northern. I did it.
If you hadn't, somebody else would have.
Well, probably so. I always thought at Murray we didn't have them, and I knew that some of the faculty were really not so hot, and I thought we might reveal some of their shortcomings if we had them. So we started immediately with Northern doing that, and but I might say that the students are very generous, I think, in their evaluations, and I don't.
I never call them student evaluations. I call them student ratings because I thought students were not in a position to do a true evaluation, but they could rate their perception of how they thought the faculty were doing it. And the other thing is, I said, it was really primarily for faculty improvement, like you were talking about. It should be just for their benefit. Of course, the chair ought to know what's going on in terms of the classroom. I mean, if you have a consistent, say, the professor's 10 minutes late for every class, certainly the chair ought to be aware of that type of thing. And I've always argued that's what student rating should be about, is to improve the faculty member. But it tends to get contorted from time to time.
Let me turn. We have we have about 10 minutes left before we adjourn and go have some time socially together. I want to turn to a question that you've not gotten any advance warning on, and it's a very personal question. Each of you served the university as president. Did you enjoy it? What did you enjoy most, and what did you enjoy least about being president at Northern? Let me start with you.
I think you have to enjoy it. I think you'd go crazy in a hurry if you didn't enjoy it, and I certainly did. I guess, my greatest sense of reward in any of my administrative position was the sense that I could help empower people to realize their goals, dreams, ambitions, whether it's faculty, staff, or students, to try to be challenging in terms of what the future was all about, try to create some excitement. I guess the one thing, and Frank alluded to it a while ago in a way, is the one thing I didn't really particularly enjoy was the constant politicking you had to do, and particularly as state support went down, you had to find yourself out in the vineyards,
Yes.
trying to get more and more private funds to try to make up some things. But Northern, the one thing I think made the job so nice is the community here. I love the community. I love Greater Cincinnati. They were very supportive of us in many different ways, both professionally and personally, and so they were good, very demanding but good years.
Yeah, fun years.
Let me read you this sentence. You know that on our individual evaluations, the question was, what advice do you have for Jim Votruba for the future? My answer is this: come now. Has anyone ever seen any person come into this greater Cincinnati community and be more graciously and enthusiastically received than Jim Votruba and Rachel? They are both gracious people. It would be presumptuous to volunteer unsolicited advice. Perhaps one thought: Jim, you might want to pray that the Kentucky Post not have another Vance Trimble as editor. This from personal experience.
That's probably good advice, and I'll get down on my knees for that.
And I'm afraid that I do not tend to get along with that type fellow.
Was the press was
Oh, dear God.
not the thing that you...
Anytime you said something complimentary of a person, he found some fault with that person. He was jealous. He wanted to be the wheel in the community.
Did you enjoy being president, Frank?
Oh, there were times, yes,
Yeah.
when you felt, yes, but really, I say in that history of Northern that I know of no group more maligned than presidents of colleges, universities, and academics, even getting close to the ministry and the church, and in the mistreatment sometimes of them.
You know, it's interesting. That I'm sure is true, but I heard a study cited recently that when parents were asked among an array of professions what they would most like their children to grow up to be, it was university presidents.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes, I had relatives that liked that.
Did you
too.
roll your eyes? When you
With a tenure of 5 years.
with a 10-year 5
That's
year?
right, yeah, that's right.
AD, how about you? Did you
Well,
enjoy it?
I did. There might have been a few instances, short-lived, I think, where I had to scratch my head.
What did you enjoy most?
For the moment, I want to
please.
present a different picture than Frank has just told. Vance Trimble and I got along fine. And there was one reason. Maybe he'd exerted all of his venom on you and didn't have any more when I got around. But as soon as I knew I was coming to Northern, I called Vance Trimble on the telephone. And then it was just about this short. I'm coming to Northern, and I need your help, and so does the university. And he said these words: "You got it." And now we didn't agree 2 or 3 times, but he didn't print it in the paper. Mm-hmm. Now I know what you're talking about, Frank. You know it very well.
Yeah, he really was savage. Headline: Steely lied to regents in big print. Underneath in little print, former faculty member says. And,
Oh yeah. But I came with the understanding that I'd be here 3 years. I liked it well enough, and apparently I got by with enough that I stayed for 4 more years. And that's some indication that most of it was pleasurable. And there are 2 or 3 reasons. There are good people around here, and they, when treated well, they respond pretty much in kind. Well, there may be a stinker or 2 here and there, but The others will take care of
Yes.
him or her. The other is there was something here that gave some promise for the future. And this was a vehicle by which some of that could be done. I said in the interview this afternoon, there were 6 or, I guess it was 7 or 8 of us, not even connected with Northern at the time, who sat around a table, well, every once in a while. Northern Kentucky was the subject. One was an architect, one was an engineer, one was a scientist, one was an educator, another was a vice president of one of the major global energy institutions or businesses in this world. And it was on the development of the Ohio River.
Mm-hmm.
And not just, and I don't mean the development of smokestack industry, but development otherwise of businesses and services. And that's the way in which the necessity for a university here really began to emerge now these were, as I say, were outside people. They were
Yes.
they were not even Northern Kentuckians.
But it goes back to that, the ability of a university to provide hope and opportunity
Yeah.
for a population in need of hope and opportunity, it seems
Yeah.
to me.
Right.
You know, I think the thing that we've all enjoyed is we've been in a building process here.
Yes.
We're not an old, well-established.
That's what I've enjoyed.
And you see the results of your labor so much better, and the fact that you can see change and sometimes bring about change a lot easier than you can at the more firmly established universities. And I've been at both. And let me tell you, this is a much more exciting environment. The other thing I felt, too, when I came here and I enjoyed and I thought it was true is, and I still think it's true, I think the urban universities are really where the future is. That's where the people are. We were talking about schedules and responsiveness and things like that. And I felt that then. I feel it now about the institution.
Yep.
And then we were talking about democracy, and this will be my last point on this, but I came from a very, very poor family in ED. I know you did too. But I had to put myself through school, and I did. And I can identify with the students here so much in terms of their working, and they know how much it's costing them to get through school and this type of thing. I think it's just a wonderful institution. And I remember at graduation time when students would go across the campus in the region said, who would have ever thought that person would have gotten a college degree?
You know, commencement is such a special time. 40% of our students are still first-generation college students. And I've never been in a forum where there was such energy
That's right.
and excitement and pride on the part of parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and brothers and sisters. And because it's on those days that you really do see the American dream played out.
Absolutely.
And we ask, I asked at last year's commencement, I asked all the first-generation college students to stand and be recognized. And I didn't anticipate the spontaneity of the outpouring. I mean, you could just see it in the faces of those relatives and friends. That's what, I mean, there are days, I would guess for all of us, that we, that you say, isn't there something more? But by and large, I can't imagine a more important purpose to serve than the role of these universities, especially these public universities. I think that about 35% of the graduating high school students in northern Kentucky went on to post-secondary education when you took over as president, when you were standing out here with shovels and dreams. Today it's about 65%, and about 85% of that additional number are here at Northern. Mm-hmm. It's an exciting time. But it is a time, I met with the vice presidents today, and we were talking about managing in turbulent times, because it is turbulent. I mean, the industry is changing, and I'll tell you a quick story. I have a mentor of mine, Paul Miller, who's now in his mid-80s, and Paul was president of the University of West Virginia and was undersecretary of HEW under John Gardner, and then finished his career as president of RIT in upstate New York. And I saw Paul a couple of weeks ago in Washington, and he said, of course, his first question was, what's going on at the university? And I rattled off 25 things, I suppose. I mean, without taking a breath, I would guess. And he said, that sounds like such fun. He said, oh, it just sounds like such fun. He said, I've been thinking about what I would do different in my career if I had it to do over again. And he said, one of the things I think I'd do different is I might not introduce quite as much change as rapidly as I did. He said, he said sometimes it didn't take as much root as and he said, I think I might have tried a little less. And then he told me a story. He said he had a vice president when he was president of the University of West Virginia who was kind of a father figure to him. And he said, Paul, he came in one day, this friend of mine's name is Paul Miller. He came in one day and he said, Paul, I've been having a dream that's been awakening me several nights now in a row, and it has you in it. And he said, I need to tell you this dream. He said, it's halftime of the West Virginia football game, and the band is marching onto the field. And you're leading the band, Paul, and your knees are going up and down, and everyone's in sync, and you have the baton in your hand, and it's going up and down. And as you move onto the field, you begin to get further from the band. And as you approach midfield, you're continuing to march away with all your enthusiasm. But as you get to midfield, you are quite a distance from the band. And as you cross the midfield, the band members begin to get out of sync with you, and they begin to peel off and march each in their own direction. And he said, Paul, you never realized that because you're so busy marching, you didn't look back to see if the band was behind you. And he said, he looked at me and he put his hand on my knee. He said, if I had it to do over again, I think I'd spend more time looking to see if the band was behind me.
I hope you don't look to see
story.
if the band is behind you for revising our general education requirements on this campus. We have the biggest bunch of malarkey in the world. Everybody who's teaching a course thinks that every student ought to take that. And we must cut those down.
Frank, I am so determined. I heard general education described recently as, at best, a treaty between departments.
Yes, it is. It
That's
is.
a pretty good description.
And I first suggested, and I like this, I said 6 hours of history, naturally, either American or European, as colleges do, 6 hours of science and math, 6 hours of literature, any literature, and that was all. And I don't think you ought to curb what students want to take to the extent that we do here at Northern.
People have said to me, why would you take this one on? But you know something, when I arrived here, I couldn't find a single faculty member who was satisfied with our general education.
You can't find a single one.
And I finally said, then why don't we fix it?
You can't find a single one who can advise a student.
You can't advise or anything else.
It's the biggest mishmash. And
maybe we should have a president's committee on revising the undergraduate core curriculum. Mm-hmm. We'll just impose it.
Otherwise, you'll be here a long time.
Well, this has been great fun. I wish we could talk on into the evening. Actually, we will be able to, but under different circumstances. I do want to say to all of you how important it's been to have you come back and share some of your thinking, and to allow me to stand on all of your shoulders, because I'm having the time of my life, in large measure because of the work that went on before me.
You're generous, President.
No, I mean it.
But it's a good idea. From where I sit, this has been a very good day.
Well, I'm glad to
Now,
hear
after
that.
you go back through this, I'd like to have your assessment of it.
Well, I'm going to sit down, and you know what got me going on this a little bit were these tapes that Charlie Palmer shared. We need to, and I think the next step is for us to make sure that some of these faculty who are right on the cusp of retirement, Jim Ramage, we were talking about Jim Ramage earlier. Jim has a perspective on the campus, and there's a number of others.
Oh, yeah.
But I thought we needed to start with our presidents, and we're blessed to have every president who served the institution able to make comment and share insights.
We're appreciative, very appreciative. No matter what we say, we like attention.
Let's go have some dinner and some more conversation, shall we?